Never believe what you publish. Never publish what you believe. Welcome to I Hope You Suffer.
That's a terrible tagline.
Oh, it's so
Come
good.
on.
Okay, so some of the other ones are Fly the Deadly Skies, Evil has a flight plan, Startling nonstop horror. I feel like that's more of a review, not a tagline.
Yeah.
And then also the best King adaptation since Misery.
Okay, that's like a liar. This movie came out like 2 days after Misery did.
Well, also, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I agree. This might okay, we'll get into it. Hold on. This is episode 80 of I Be Suffer. My name is Nathan, and I like to party.
I'm Kit, and I like to party.
I'm Katie, and I like to party.
This
You
week,
don't like to party. You've never partied.
yeah.
I'm the only one that parties. You guys have never partied.
Start calling Katie Voltron from now on. This week we are talking about 1997's The Night Flyer. Okay. Hot take. I think this might be the best King adaptation.
That is a hot take.
This might be my favorite King adaptation now that I've seen.
It's no thinner.
This like
If we're being honest.
the last 20 minutes of this pushed it overboard for me to like outdo Thinner as like my favorite.
As someone who does not like Thinner, I wouldn't say that it's my favorite adaptation, but it's definitely now very high up there for me. I really liked it.
To be fair, a majority of the King adaptations I have watched have been because of this podcast. So, like Dreamcatcher and shit.
It's definitely my favorite, like, vampire design.
Oh, it's so good.
With that.
I don't know. There was something about like, even though this was like 1997, it feels very 80s to me.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know,
Yes.
I liked the feel. Like, granted, I have no idea how it stacks up to like the actual written story, but like, I was very into this movie.
Well, the thing I think is interesting about it, that you said it feels very 80s, is that one of the trivias about the actual movie is that, according to the internet, it actually originally aired as a HBO movie.
Yeah.
Because to me, the reason I liked it so much is that it had that feel sort of like a Tales from the Crypt story. Like, obviously, it was the other great thing about this movie is that it's only like an hour and 10 minutes long or whatever. So yeah, that's the same like sort of feeling that I got too.
I definitely would say that like the first 30 minutes at least are slightly boring, because this movie is very heavily predicated on like a news reporter like work. So it's just like a dude and then kind of like two news reporters just like trying to figure out this story. But then like once it kind of starts like unraveling as to like what's going on, and especially like I said, when you get to like the last like 20 minutes or so, I fucking loved it. I was very surprised at how much I like enjoyed this movie, because I didn't know anything about it before. Like, I didn't know it was a movie that even existed until Katie suggested it.
Yeah,
I've
go
seen
ahead.
the like still of the vampire guy, so I was really excited to get to watch it, and it turned out to be really good.
Can't say that for a lot of King adaptations, I think.
That it turned out to be good.
Yeah. This one at least
I actually,
ended better than most of them do.
I have to say, this was like one of those movies that I hadn't seen before, and I said this last time, that I had always wanted to see it, but I just like didn't. I just couldn't. get my hands on it basically. And then earlier when I was trying to find it, I almost didn't find it either.
It's weird that like of all of the movies, this is the one that's like out of print.
Yeah. So, but what I was going to say is I not only did I like this movie just as a movie, it kind of surprised me because I liked it more than the story. So obviously I'll talk a little bit about the story later, but the way that this differed, it's really interesting because it was like one of the adaptations that to me had the most actual stuff from the story. Like whenever the main character Deez is like talking to him to his like recorder or whatever, or other people are talking, there's like the most text taken directly from the story that I think I've ever noticed in most of them. But then obviously the ending is completely different. And it got to a point where like I wasn't really sure if I liked where the ending was going, but then after it happened, I actually like it so much better. So I'll talk about that later, obviously. But so yeah, I don't know. I liked the reason that I like this story so much too is because it is, like you guys said, a very different take on vampires, which I don't feel like we see a lot.
I've never seen a vamp pilot.
I was gonna say more vampires should be flying planes.
Yeah, vampilots.
Oh my god, I love Vampilot. How did I not think of that? So yeah, I'll talk about the story a little bit more like in depth later, I guess. But
all right, so this movie was directed by Mark Pavia. Writing credits to Stephen King, Mark Pavia, and Jack O'Donnell. Starring Will Arnett levels of dickhead actor Miguel Ferrer. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Plays an absolute perfect, just like jerk in movies.
He's such a good piece of shit.
Is he in Biodome? Who's the guy that plays the guy that keeps calling him by the wrong names? That's not him, is it?
Nah.
Okay, I don't know. For some reason, every time I see him, I think that's like the same person.
I think both of them were in ER together. I think that dude was in ER.
With Pauly Shore?
Maybe I'm making it up. I don't know.
I want Pauly Shore to be in an episode of ER.
He's the lead doctor.
Yeah.
Here, Clooney.
That would be amazing. Pauly Shore's Batman. It also stars Julie Entwistle.
I thought that she looked familiar, but she has like no other credit. She has like one other movie.
She was cast. I think I remember reading that she was cast because she was like married to somebody in the movie. Something like that. Something weird. And then I just have Dan Monahan. But specifically because I noticed it when I was looking through credits, I did a little special one for Katie. There are 12 Matlock connections in this movie.
Wow.
That's the best.
Michael H. Haas has been in 2 episodes. John Bennis has been in 1. Beverly Skinner's in 2. Richard K. Olsen's been in 5. William Neely has been in 1. General Ferran Judd has been in 1. Like, everybody I looked up in this movie had like at least like been in like an episode of Matlock. It was crazy. And most of these people that had like were in more than one played different characters.
Did it just like crash the Matlock set?
Apparently. What is happening over there, Katie?
Sorry, my cat just jumped on a bookshelf and knocked a bunch of stuff over.
Well, they're her books now.
Yeah,
R.I.P. books.
pretty much. Yeah, I noticed you were saying people play. They did that a lot in Columbo, where they would have people like come back in different seasons, sometimes 2 or 3 times, like different characters, and I'm like, guess there wasn't a lot of actors in the 70s, but
I mean, there was. They just didn't use any of them.
yeah, right. So, so yeah, Matlock's great.
This is officially canon in the Matlock universe.
Oh my God. I would love if they did a Matlock. I don't know if this exists, but if they did a Matlock style show, but like it was like Matlock
Paranormal.
defending the van pilot.
In court, where he's just got the fucking like whole cape on still.
Yeah, and he's like, my client didn't kill those people. That's so exciting.
Oh yeah, Julie Entwistle's only other credit was in the movie In and Out with like the fucking dude from Will and Grace.
I think Miguel Ferrier, whatever, he was also in Will and Grace.
Oh yeah, Will and Grace probably had like a lot of connections to that show.
The other reason, so I did not know that he was in this movie, and when I saw him show up, I kind of was like, oh, I didn't really picture him to be the main character, because in the story, he's like not as much as a dick as this guy is, but I really liked it for the scenes where he was talking to himself in the tape recorder, because he's also in Twin Peaks, so it was like a nice little like connection.
All right, well, that's the end of my notes. So
Okay.
I've got 3 quotes that I can't wait to get to.
Okay, great. Okay, so Night Flyer is based off of a short story, also called Night Flyer, that came out in 1988, question mark. I'm not really sure. It was originally published in a collection that was like a bunch of other people's writings also, and then was reprinted in Nightmares and Dreamscapes in like 93 or something, which is like the... Jesus Christ. Sorry, my cat is... which is like what you can get it from now, because I have that collection too. And the only other thing I have is, so one of the other things was that they apparently had written a sequel script called Fear of Flying, which was supposed to follow Catherine, which she's not in the story. They made her for the movie. And at first I was like, I don't really understand why they did this, but then it ties in with the ending so well that I was like really for her existing, and I thought a sequel where they sort of like follow her after the events of this happening actually sounded pretty cool to me, but unfortunately they couldn't.
Did you see
get funding.
The budget and like how much it made?
Mm-mm.
This movie apparently estimated cost $1 million to make. Gross
Jesus.
125,000 worldwide.
Huh.
So this movie lost a fuck ton of money.
Did they spend it all buying that like black Cessna?
Pretty much, I think.
It's kind of hard to get people to go to the movie theater to see your movie when you release it on TV before the theatrical screenings.
I mean, you can't prove that.
Yeah, I know. We're about to find out over the next like month, so.
So the only other thing noteworthy about the collection Nightmares and Dreamscapes is that the other story that was made into an adaptation from that collection is Dolan's Cadillac, which is the one with Christian Slater.
What is that about? I know they made a movie about it.
I think it is about like somebody whose wife is murdered by like a mobster, and then he has to like go in on revenge scheme or something.
Oh.
I don't really remember. Like, yeah. So, anyways, those are the notable things. So let's start. So basically, we start with a man who is doing plane talk. There's a lot of stuff that happens like over air traffic control kind of things, but these are very, very small airports for like 2 passenger planes to land in. So it's just like some guy on his CB radio, like talking to airplanes. And there's a lot of Charlie 410 breaker kind of stuff. Like, I don't really know. So basically they show him talking to an unresponsive plane that's like on his runway. So
what is happening?
Plane talk.
Sorry, yeah. So basically he's like, if you're not gonna move your plane, I'll do it my damn self, like a mood. So he goes out to inspect the plane. It's like one of those tiny 2 passenger planes, and he sees that there's like blood on the side of it, and then he's like, oh, this is creepy. And he like, the door of the plane is open, so he looks in, immediately gets his head smashed in the door, and then you just get a shot of his face, and he just has these like huge slashes across his face that are just like squirting blood. And then we see the outline, the silhouette of the Night Flyer in his sick cape.
Ooh, spooky.
So, then we cut to the office building of the quote-unquote inside view, which is basically a paper that's kind of like the National Enquirer. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they post stuff about like demonic three-headed babies and aliens and stuff like that.
Bat Boy.
The real news.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I wonder how Bat Boy's doing. Shout out Bat Boy.
Hope he doesn't have
Yeah.
corona.
Hope he's staying safe. Maybe it's like, aren't bats, like, aren't there a bunch of things that they can't get? But maybe they have.
Maybe. They can't get driver's licenses, so.
Oh my God. But they can get pilots. That's fine. So we see the inside of the newsroom. Dees shows up, and he's the main character. He immediately is an asshole and snatches a paper away from a woman and is yelling at her because his picture of a dead baby did not make it into an article.
Where's my goddamn dead baby?
Yeah. They also cuss a lot in this movie, which, like, I never thought about it, but I feel like a lot of the movies that we watch, there's not a lot of cussing. So I just noticed because he's like very aggressive to people.
I approve of it. It just like it works for like that actor. Again, like,
oh yeah, it does. I just thought it was weird that was something that I noticed. Even though like it wasn't her fault or whatever. So then we get a shot inside of his boss. I think it's Morrison. Yeah, Morrison is talking to a new girl, Catherine.
his first name is Merton. Merton.
Merton.
That dude looks like a Merton.
Basically, like, he is hiring her to fill a position, and he's talking about what the paper is. And they say a bunch of gobbledygook, which basically boils down to they run fake stories.
Newspaper talk.
Yeah. And Dee's like barges in complaining about the dead baby picture, and basically it's just like, hey, here's Catherine, she's replacing whatever. Then Catherine is like, okay, cool, and leaves her purse in there, and Dee's like immediately picks her purse up and like starts to go through it, and she comes back in and it's just like, dude, that's my purse. So you already know that he is like the worst guy ever.
Speaking of dead baby pictures, did you see the trivia thing on here that all of the pictures in the background of like dead bodies and shit are real pictures?
No.
What?
They
I'm
like
glad
they
I
pulled
didn't.
them out of like some book. That so like all of the pictures in the background of like the like their workspaces and all that shit are like real pictures of dead bodies.
Gross.
That is terrifying.
One of my favorite goofs about this is that it's like there are shots of Dees flying his craft, and he does not have a headset. But no one flies this type of craft without a headset. And I'm like, this is like the calculator watch thing all over again.
Very mad somebody didn't put in what kind of plane was in all of these shots.
They're the actual planes. So his is a Beechcraft.
I know,
and
but like
the other one,
like the guy that does the cars trivia, like why is there not one for planes?
Maybe I'll be the planes guy.
Yep, this is your calling.
Plane talk, Katie.
That's right. So, and then the other one's a Cessna. The only kind of like small plane I've ever heard of, to be honest. I think like what adds to this movie is that like I'm terrified of like, well, I'm a little bit more used to flying now, but I would literally never get into like a two-person plane. And this guy,
It's terrifying.
I believe it. And this guy's just like zip zop boobity bop. Here I am flying around.
I want everyone to know that those are very scientific terms.
I'd be really horrified if my pilot just started saying boop bop zippity zop or
That's
whatever.
like all the
If
door.
your
That's
pilot was Bill Cosby.
yeah. I would be also terrified of that.
Yikes. Okay, so okay, so then Morrison is like, "Hey guy, I have this story for you about this guy who's just flying into airports and killing people, sucking out their blood." And get this, he goes by the name Dwight Renfield, which basically explains, like, if people who are like familiar with like vampire movies and Dracula know what Renfield is. But basically he was like Dracula's servant in Dracula, and I guess Dwight was the name of like the actor who portrayed him like famously or whatever. So he's like, yeah, isn't that weird? And Deez is like, no, that's stupid. I don't want to do. And so Morrison is like, hey, like, I want you to do this story, and basically is sending him because he is quote unquote good with Hicks.
God
Which,
damn it.
not really. Yeah. So basically,
He feels like somebody that's not good with people in general.
right? Like, yeah. So basically, Morrison's like, hey, you should do this story because, like, buddy, you're not doing very well, and you haven't been on the cover of the magazine in a really long time, so, like, you should do this. And Deez is, of course, mad, and he leaves. So he gets in his car. For some reason, Karen decides that she's going to follow him to, he ends up going to a bar. And for some reason, so she, like, shows up. For some reason, he decides that he's going to call her Jimmy. And he says some kind of, like, yeah, and I was just like, okay. So Karen basically, like, Karen. I'm sorry, I'm going to call her Karen a lot. I don't know why. Her name's Catherine. There's a lot of Karen memes going around right now, guys. So,
Been watching The Office again.
So basically she wants to be friends with him, and she wants advice on how to be a reporter for the paper. And she says that, and basically he just, like, says a lot of, like, really degrading stuff to her about, like, kind of, like, stereotypes her, like, she was a student and then she was working for the Herald and blah blah blah. And she basically is just like, well, you're a real report, you think you're a real reporter, right? So like, and he just gets mad at her, and then that's when he says the line, he's like, my advice is never believe what you publish and never publish what you believe, which is the tagline. So basically he is mean to her the whole time, and then she starts crying, and he's like, hey, listen, like, the only reason you have this job is because the previous reporter, Dottie, I think her name was basically, like, driven crazy by the stories that they were covering, and she committed suicide. And then you get the shot of Dottie, like, in her bathtub, and then it pans over, and Deez is just, like, taking her picture. So, they, in the story, there's, like, a lot of description about basically the only thing he cares about is the photos, and he is, like, has this, like, coveted camera, and he's, like, obsessed with getting a picture of the night flyer, like, later on. And I guess they kind of, even though he doesn't overtly say that in the movie, they show it because we get a lot of shots of him taking pictures of, like, really grotesque stuff. So that's the first time we see that, aside from, him being mad about his dead baby picture. So Catherine basically, like, starts crying and leaves, and of course Deez is like, heh, I'm the shit. So
Actual dialogue from this movie.
Might as well be. So now we get a picture of the black Cessna, and it's, like, panning over the country. Basically, we see a trailer. There's a older woman in a nightgown looking real Twitter-pated, and she gets up and...
Wait a second. What was that word?
Twitter-pated?
Yeah.
It's from Bambi. She's all Twitter-pated. She's in love.
I'm done with this podcast.
She's basically, like, looking all dreamy. And so she's like walking around the side of the house and she's like looking through a window and you can tell there's some sort of like something going on. And all of a sudden her husband just gets like slammed into the window. He's like all bloody and he's like yelling help. And she just is like, that was fine. So she just like walks into the trailer, then like goes into her bedroom and is basically just like admiring herself and like waiting for someone to come. And then we see basically like the silhouette of the Night Flyer. And by silhouette of the Night Flyer, I mean you literally just like see his cape a bunch. So, which I don't know, it's a pretty cool effect, I think, because you literally don't get to see him, what he looks like until like the very end, which I thought is cool. So he shows up and then the room or the scene just fades to black. So Dees comes into Morrison's office the next day, and Morrison's like, "Hey, the Night Flyer struck again." Did you guys notice like there's this like side shot of like the side of the office so you can see both men, and in the background there's like this 3-piece painting of like a lounging minotaur.
No, I didn't.
No.
I recommend going back to look at it because it's crazy.
I want a lounging minotaur.
He's just like lounging on like a marble slab, like Cash. So, basically he says that Catherine was able to find out the info about the new killing because she like hacked a police database or something. So then Dees admits that. Oh, so then basically Morrison's like, "Hey, I'll give you the story, but you have to admit that maybe you were wrong about this case." And Dees is like, "Okay, fine. Fine, I was wrong. Like, give me the files." So, then we get just like a little background. Morrison kind of like talks about the victims up until now, which I'm going to skip because we visit all of them basically. And he promises Dees that if he can get the story, then he will give him like a front page exclusive basically. And this part made me so mad. So basically like Catherine comes in and Morrison is basically just like, "Hey, I'm going to give the story to Dees. Give him your files." And she's like, "That's not fair. Like, this is my story." And then Morrison's like, "I made the decision." And then Dees takes the file from her and says, "Thank you, dear." I was like, you motherfucker. I would have punched that guy in the face. Like, ugh, it made me so mad. So basically he takes the story away from her, which is really shitty because she had already done this background research. So, basically now Dees is starting to like research where the Night Flyer has been already. So the first location he lands his plane, and we see Ezra, who is a mechanic, who is like literally the quintessential quote unquote Stephen King main guy. He like is like, yup, reckon it tweren't. Like that's the guy he is. So basically he asks what happened to the first victim, whose name was Claire, and we get a flashback of the Night Flyer plane like landing there at night. The Night Flyer gets out of the plane, and this is like Ezra we see what's happening. Ezra's watching it, and the Night Flyer like gets out of the plane, and he's like, he was dressed really weird. He had this cloak. The inside was fire engine red, and the outside was black as a woodchuck's asshole. I'm sorry, what?
It was so perfect in his main accent. I was black as a woodchuck's asshole.
That feels like a line Stephen King wrote to me.
He did. That was literally out of the story.
It has to be.
Yeah, and his like vocal fries that he it was literally like, this might as well have been like Pet Sematary. But one of the interesting tie-ins that I thought that they added is that Ezra says that the Night Flyer had flown in from Derry, which is not in the story. They just like added it into the movie. So I thought that was kind of like a cool nod. I think maybe they mentioned Bangor in the story, but like that's literally every Stephen King story. So so basically the next morning, Ezra comes back to work and Claire is still there acting really weird. he's like washing the plane, and Ezra's like, okay, like this is weird. And then he's like talking to him about it. Then it's just like hard cut to Claire's like decapitated head on his desk. And so that was pretty cool. And then Ezra mentions that there was like a pile of dirt under the plane that had like worms and maggots, which gross. And this is the first time that Dees does this, but he just like takes a picture of Ezra talking like mid-sentence and it's just like, thanks, bye. So, this scene was
Good
like
way to exit that conversation. Just like
just like, see ya.
take a picture with the flash and be like, all right, bye.
That's what I'm gonna start
Looks
doing
shitty.
every
Bye,
conversation I have. Every time someone comes up to me at work and asks a question, just like answer it, then just flash them right in the face and.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, bye. So then Dees goes to the cemetery to take a picture of Claire's grave, and first of all, this is like a newly buried person. He takes some old, like, dead flowers from someone else's grave and kicks his stone over, like, kicks it out of the ground so it's sideways. Then he, like, cuts his own hand and rubs blood all over it so he could, like, stage a picture for his story. Which, like, they come back to this a lot in the story where they're like, oh, our readers just like depravity and it's for messed up and this and that and other thing. But, like, why would that have happened to his grave? Like, what does that have to do with anything? I don't know. So
I don't remember any part of this movie, like any of that in this movie, so.
okay, yeah. So basically, like, he touches the stone, and this is the first time he has a flash of. He basically, like, sees the Night Flyer in his plane, and the Night Flyer kind of, like, recognizes that Dees can see him. And then some kid shows up and is basically just like, hey, like, you're a dickhead. Why are you doing this? Get the fuck out of here.
I want to watch your movie.
So then back at the hotel, basically he's like in bed and he looks up and we get the scene of Dees like thinks he can see the Night Flyer come out from behind his curtains, but again, the scene I thought was really cool because it's like the silhouette of him, but then you can see his like weird like straggly pieces of hair or whatever. And then he like is scared, but it turned out to be a dream and he's like, oh man, I'm tripping. But then he gets up and looks out his window and someone has written stay away in blood on the window. And so he's just like, whatever, it was that kid from the graveyard, which, like, not really sure like why you shouldn't be worried about that, but whatever.
Yeah, right. Like, it's just somebody just covered my window in blood, but it's fine.
Kid.
Yeah. No
Like,
big deal.
The idea that that guy followed him from the graveyard to his hotel freaks me out. Whatever. So he is back in his plane, and there's a lot of. Basically, he's saying that there's no flight record of like the plane coming from where he says it came from, and so he's basically just like, why didn't Claire think that was weird, and he didn't like make a note of it, whatever. So he bribes a coroner to go down and see the victim who we saw get killed in the very beginning. And this is the first time that we see basically how the vampire or the Night Flyer is like taking blood from people. And it's basically just like these huge, like gaping wounds on the sides of of their neck.
So much. Like, he just like their whole like neck is gone.
Yeah, and this was like a funny part too because like this was the guy who got the slashes on his face, and when the coroner's like showing Dees, the cuts kind of like come unglued, and he's just like, damn, glue, hope that doesn't happen at the wake. And I was like, oh my god, terrifying.
I love like that reveal of like how like fucked up and gruesome like the vampire bites are.
Yeah, because too, you're like, how did that happen?
It works really well with when you finally like see the vampire.
Yeah. Um, so back at the hotel, Deez is sort of like listening to his interviews with Ezra, and Ezra refers to the Night Flyer as the Night Flyer, and then he like steals the tagline. So he calls Morrison to like update him on basically what's happened so far. And Morrison, they're like going back and forth, and Morrison is like, "I'm so excited. God, I hope he kills more people." And I was like, he's somehow worse than Deez, who was the worst human I've ever heard of. I mean, not really,
Classic
but
Merton.
that's right. So Morrison like goes and finds out that Catherine is still like working on the Night Flyer story, and he basically tells her that if she wants the story back, she has to go out there and get the story, and if she comes back with the story first, then she gets the headline or like the cover page or whatever. So I'm not really sure like why this scene is in here other than to further illustrate that Deez is like a piece of crap, but he comes up to like a really, really terrible car crash and he just like is like taking pictures of them.
That's so weird.
Oh, you know why? Because he gets a flash of a victim that comes back like much later. He sort of like sees the you know what? I don't know what he gets a flash of another victim basically that they don't know about yet. And then the sheriff basically like tells him to leave, and he's like, "No, I'm the press." And he's like, "Okay, just don't get in the way." And I was like, "Does that work? Really? Okay."
Yeah, I don't think that's how that works. But
I mean, I'm not an investigative reporter, so
Whoa.
guess I wouldn't know.
Whoa. Since when?
Since I was laid off, so.
Since you went into quarantine.
That's right. That's why I don't know how Batboy's doing, to be honest. But so yeah. So basically, Deez is back in his plane, and he's like, at this point, narrating to the Night Flyer about his victims, and he calls his like recent victim a one night stand, which is weird. And basically is like says that the story is like starting to get to him basically. And then he talks to a couple different people about like the older couple who we've already seen being killed, about how they were acting weird. The lady.
I just looked up Batboy news.
Yeah.
And I opened an article that's Batboy boycotts Super Tuesday. This is the latest article about Batboy.
We stand.
I love it. That's right.
Fucking figure out why he's boycotting. Let's see. Batboy boycotts Super Tuesday, and the reason may shock you.
What is it?
Batboy, the iconoclastic independent whose every move seems to shake up this year's presidential campaign season, has done it again. On a day that is seeing primary voting in 14 states and one territory, American Samoa, blah, 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 political pundits are hoping that voters will... Wait, this is horribly written. Political pundits are hoping that voters will, being the 2020 presidential... This is very badly done. One important element is missing. Batboy. He decided to sit this one out, said Batboy's campaign manager, PhD Ape. He just doesn't think Super Tuesday is fair. It's an interesting argument, said Sarah Carson. This is... Why are we
Sarah
not doing
Carson.
Weekly World News podcast instead?
Oh
my god, there's a picture of PhD Ape. Alright, go. I'm gonna send you guys a picture of PhD Ape while we're talking.
Okay.
Oh, I've never wanted.
Okay, so so the lady, it was weird because the lady got her hair done early and she was acting like she was like having a crush or whatever. And he finds out that they invited the van pilot in to like watch TV and stuff. So he was there for like a day or two or whatever. So now Dees goes to the trailer, and at the same time that he's like looking around the trailer, we also get this like narration of a cop explaining like what happened when they got to the scene, and so you're seeing what the cop saw at the same time you're seeing like Dee walk through the trailer. So basically, you see that again, the man was decapitated, and his head was like in like the corner of the room or something. And but they also had I think it's FAA, which or something, warning about the pilot on the bulletin board. So now Deez is like, well, that's really weird because like they should have expected him. Like if they saw him, they should have known that he was dangerous and called somebody, but they didn't. And basically the lady just was like died peacefully in bed. There was no blood anywhere. Then there's like a really weird scene where there's like a demon dog on the roof of the trailer. Not really sure like what's going on with that, but basically he like takes a picture of the dog and then like runs away and the dog chases him, but then the dog is like up on top of the trailer when he gets in the car. I don't really know like what this is supposed to be. Maybe just the Night Flyer like messing with him. I don't know. So, Dee basically tells Morrison that the Night Flyer, like he has some spell over the victims where they just like do whatever like he wants or whatever. So then Morrison is like on the other line with Catherine, and the only thing you find out basically is that like Dee and Catherine are staying at the same hotel, which Morrison thinks is really funny and just like laughs about it because he's a maniac. So cut to Dee's is like at a bar, and the bartender brings him over a really gross looking Bloody Mary, and the napkin underneath it says "Stop now," and it was the Night Flyer just like came in and sent him a drink. He freaks out and runs outside and is like scared by a bunch of stuff, but then you see the Night Flyer's plane flying overhead, and Deez is really mad about it. So he got to his plane really fast because he had to be like far enough out that he could take off.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's very quick. Like stop and then getting back up in the air and then circling back overhead.
Yeah. Okay, so then
That pilot.
yes, yeah. So Deez goes back to his hotel and of course runs into Catherine, and he basically like yells at her and tells her that she's like stupid and that Morrison's like messing with her, and she's like, no, I have all of this information that you don't have, and like I'm gonna take the story back, and he's basically just like, let's be partners, and she's like, all right. So then I wrote montage of investigative journalisming. So they're basically just like calling a bunch of airlines and like, or not airlines, but like little airports trying to figure out like if they've seen the plane or like whatever for a while. So then eventually Deez calls the airport in Wilmington, North Carolina, and asks the guy if the plane's there, and the guy is literally just like, no, and like hangs up. And they're like, well, that was weird. So they're gonna fly there now. But basically Deez like locks Catherine in a closet and is like, thanks for helping me, bitch. See ya. And he flies off. So he is in the air, like on his way, calling down to the airport to like see if the plane is there before he lands. But the traffic control guy like doesn't answer, and he just hears a bunch of screaming, which is really confusing to me because I thought like they have to be pressing on the depressor for you to like hear anything that's happening over there. So
maybe he wanted him to hear him screaming.
Yeah, I guess. So there's a bunch of screams, and then the Night Flyer like gets on the intercom and is just like, hey bro, turn around, don't come over here. And Deez is like fuck you, basically. So he lands at the airport. It's like thunder and lightning all of a sudden, and he sees the Cessna. Huh?
It's very, very frightening.
Yeah. So he sees the Cessna and he goes and like take pictures of it, and he sees the blood on the side. he looks inside the plane and it's like super gross. It's like sticky, crusty with blood everywhere, which I'm like, I haven't seen him kill anybody inside the plane, but it's just like caked in blood.
You guys,
What?
Batboy picks Bigfoot for his 2020 running mate.
I support. We stand our president, Batboy.
Taylor Swift holds fundraiser for Batboy.
Ugh.
I am down a rabbit hole.
So Dees finds an old photo album that has pictures of, I guess what we're to assume Night Flyer looks like, with like his 18th century bride and whatever. And then in the back of the Cessna is just like wormy dirt and issues of the inside view, which I like to think he was just like laying in his little dirt with like dirt covering him like a blanket, and he's got his little like reading glasses on, and he's just like reading the inside view.
It seems pretty comfy, honestly.
I mean, yeah.
Hello.
A little dirt pillow. So he starts hearing screaming again, so he goes inside the terminal, and
There's a fucking article that's literally no words, just 30 different pictures of women Batboy wants to date.
wow. What's his type?
Tall, fit women in bikinis, apparently.
Oop, that's not me. So he goes inside the terminal, and there's just dead bodies everywhere, and of course Dee's just like taking pictures of all of these people. One of the thoughts I had was like, for a small airport, there are a lot of people there. There's like a lot of dead people. One of my favorite scenes is that it like pans over to like the little cafeteria, and there's one guy whose face is like on the flat top now, and then there's just like an eyeball on a bag of chips, and I was like, all right, I like it. So then he finds the victim, who he had a flash of before, where it's just this guy who has like a chain sticking out of his mouth, so he pulls it out and it's a cross, and then Dee's like drops the cross and it lands like on the guy's neck wound, and I don't know why, but it made me feel so gross. I was like, ugh. And Dees takes a picture of it.
I dislike the combination of the words neck and wound.
It is making
Right?
me uncomfortable.
So then this is when Dees decides that he has seen too much, and he starts to run to the bathroom, and he just like slips in a puddle of blood and falls in it, which gross. So he runs into the bathroom and starts throwing up in the sink. And this is like my favorite part of it because he's like looking in the mirror, and all of a sudden he hears footsteps, but like he can't see anything, right? And then you just hear peeing, and he looks in a urinal, and there's just like bloody pee in a urinal. And so this happens in the story too, and the line that he says is, "I am watching a vampire take a piss." And I was like, if that is not the most Stephen King vampire thing ever.
Except
Friggin' loved it.
There would have been 2 pages describing his invisible dick.
I didn't get it this time. That's why I need the sequel.
Can
Ooh,
we
in
just
the
make-
sequel, Catherine falls in love with Night Flyer.
Ooh. That's very depressing because I know what he looks like.
He's kind of cute.
She just heard that powerful piss and was like, that's the man for me.
Yeah, I need to give that a try. So,
Gross.
so basically, this seems really cool because you get a lot of it shot looking like you see the reflection of the mirror, so you see Dee's, and then you see not the Night Flyer because he doesn't have a reflection. But basically, the Night Flyer like walks over to him, or walks to him, but he's like smashing the mirrors in. But like you
I
don't
thought
see
that
the
was cool.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, just the mirror shattering as he walks by.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's probably what they spent all the money on, was like these like scenes.
The airplane and a bunch of exploding mirrors.
Yeah, money well spent.
That's
I
worth
think
$1 million to me.
Yeah, hard agree.
overall, I thought we see like a pretty good amount of gore for this movie that's not very long, and I thought it all looked like pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it looked better than a lot of the movies that we've watched for this. Um, so basically, okay, so he's smashing the mirrors, and then we just see again the silhouette of the cape just like standing behind Dee's because now we're seeing as if we are the mirror and we're looking at them. And the Night Flyer's basically just like, bro, I know who you are, and you cannot tell my story, and you need to open your camera, or I'm gonna fucking kill you. And Dee's is basically just like, I don't really want to, and he's just like, bro, come on. So he's like, all right. So he opens the camera, and then the Night Flyer like reaches forward and like is pulling the film out, and you see his like gross, slimy hand with his like big fingernails. And then the Night Flyer starts like caressing his face, of course, and is basically just like, we have a lot in common, and just normal stuff that you say. And so the Night Flyer is just like, don't follow me or I will kill you. Okay. And then he just like leaves.
Well,
Um,
sort of.
well, he like walks out and there's like bloody, he leaves the bathroom, and Dee sees that there's like bloody footprints. So in this scene, you get like close-ups of Dee's and the Night Flyer sort of like pulling his head back and like touching him and stuff. So you sort of see his face, like, but it's out of focus, so you can't really actually see what he looks like at this point. So I thought that was pretty cool. So Dee's, of course, does the opposite of what the Night Flyer says and like runs out into the terminal behind him. And you see the Night Flyer just like in the distance, like walking out. And again, it's only a silhouette because it's like really light in front of him. And Dee's is like, I just want to see your face. Like, I just need to see what you look like. And the Night Flyer's literally just like, okay. Like, so he turns around and we finally see his face, which I kind of wish they didn't put on the cover because
It would be such a good reveal if it wasn't
I luckily
spoiled on the cover.
I never saw it, and I was like, this is fucking dope. It's
Yeah,
so
so-
cool.
I already, because I had seen the cover a lot, obviously, like, knew what he looked like, but the reveal was really cool, so I wish they would have taken it off. But if you are listening and you haven't seen the cover, like, don't Google it, just watch the movie, because it's a really good... Basically, all I'm gonna say is that he's just kind of, like, slimy, and he looks a lot more like a bat than I think most vampires are portrayed as.
He's got a cool tooth.
Yes.
Yeah,
his
he does.
teeth are great.
Yeah. He's got a tooth.
He's got
So...
technically two, one on each side, like, top and bottom, but
Right. So the reveal is really cool because he's like, yeah, you want to see my face? He doesn't say that, but he like turns around.
not everybody is like a 1920s gangster Katie.
You don't know that.
You don't. So he turns around and you see his face, and he does this like really crazy like mouth stretchy thing that like I can't. The effect looks so crazy. Like I don't.
It's so good.
I can't. I don't know how to describe how they did it or what it was. Like I don't know. It was really cool. And yeah, you see his little razor sharp tooths, and then he like slits his own wrist and basically makes Dee drink it, and he's just like, now you'll know what hell feels like. And you're like, huh? And he just like runs away. So this is the part that I was kind of like, what the fuck is happening?
I am fully on board with all of this.
So Dee basically like wakes up, and he's now in a really, really foggy, like black and white version of the terminal. And basically all of the victims that the Night Flyer has killed start like rising out of the fog as zombies or vampires. Kind of zombie vampires. They were kind of both.
Vampires.
Ooh. Vampire.
Vampies.
Bambi. And so they basically kind of all sort of like represent the people in Dee's life, basically. Like the one that I liked the most, the two that I liked the most was one of the guys is like, hey Dee, look over here. And he looks over, and the guy's eyeballs are like camera flashes, and he's like taking pictures with his eyes, and I was like, oh my God, that's so terrifying. But because everything's black and white, it all looks so cool.
Yeah.
And then my other favorite one is he sees Dottie like in the bathtub, and I don't know what she says to him, but basically her head like explodes, and it's so crazy looking. Um and so basically they're all like, "Hey, join us," or whatever, and he's like, I don't think so. So he gets like breaks an emergency glass case and gets an axe, and he just like starts like hacking these people, and he's getting like sprayed with blood, and that kind of goes on for a little while, and then seamlessly just like cuts to real life, and it's like literally the cops are like, "Hey, whoa, put your hands up," and it shows Dee's just like standing in the middle of all these slain people covered in blood with an axe, so it looks like he murdered everybody. And Catherine shows up. She's like, oh my God, what's going on? And he's like crazy at this point, and he just like lunges at her. So the cops shoot him dead. He's dead. And then outside we see the Night Flyer looking gross. And then the lightning flashes, and he's just a normal human now. And, you know, as you do. So Catherine goes and looks outside and sees the Night Flyer out the window looking good in his cape. And he looks at her, and then he just like gets in his cab and flies away. And so she says, she's like freaked out, obviously. And then she says, "Oh, never believe what you publish and never publish what you believe." So then she goes back inside, and the cops are like, "Well, what's going on?" And she's like, "His name is Richard Dees, and we call him the Night Flyer." And then she's like, "Sorry, Dees, you lose." And then you just get a shot of Dees' dead face on the cover of the magazine, and the column is by Catherine Jimmy Blair. The end.
I think this ending, like you said earlier, it feels very Tales from the Crypt.
Mm-hmm.
But I like it. I was very on board with the ending of this movie.
I do too, because I think it. So basically, the short story is we follow Dees through the beginning part of it, except for Catherine, is like pretty much what happens. But then the ending is that when he's landing in the airport, I'm not really sure why this is part of it, but he like basically almost crashes his plane into the terminal. And then he goes into like the same thing. He goes into the terminal. People are dead. He goes into the bathroom. That bathroom scene happens, except for the Night Flyer is like, "Dude, don't tell my story. I will kill you. Give me your film." And then the Night Flyer leaves, and then Dees goes out to try and follow him, and then he slips in the blood and falls, and then that's when the cops show up and are like, "Dude, put your hands up," and they just like think he did it, and that's it. So I don't know, I think that this was a better ending because it like close it, like it's all very like all the loose ends are connected or whatever, right? And at first I was like, when the Night Flyer like is all gross looking and then he becomes normal, I'm just like, what was that about? And I was like, oh, it's because like he turned into a monster because people caught on to the fact that he was a monster and was like telling everybody about it, so he appeared that way. But now that he made everything look like it was actually Deez's fault, people don't know who he is anymore, so now he can look normal. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And it's better than...
I did not put any of that together. I am very dumb.
Well, that's what I took away from it. So like while the end of the story is still Deez, I guess you can just like, you can only kind of infer that he's gonna get caught for the crimes, but you don't really know. And in the movie, it's like pretty definite because he gets killed for it, and that's the twist. So that's why I feel like I'm okay with them making up Catherine, because like she's the one that reports that it was him or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I like that ending, and I am upset that they never did a sequel. So I'd be very interested to see where that was like going with, especially if it ended up being like a weird love story with her and the Flyer.
TM.
Yeah.
I'll write it.
Fuck it, somebody make it. That's all I want. All right. What are we doing next week?
I don't think we know yet.
Yeah. I mean,
We were tentatively gonna do Cell, but
well,
I don't know.
at this point, I feel like if we're going to rent a movie, I would rather spend that money on Veronica.
Okay, so just do
So, like,
something.
I mean, I think the two that are easiestly available is Children of the Corn and Secret Window. And I've never seen Secret Window,
Um,
but I don't know how like fun that would be to talk about because I don't really know anything about it.
I think I am very familiar with both movies. I really like Children of the Corn. I don't know how Secret Window holds up because I haven't seen it in a long time, but when it came out, I loved it. Like I thought it was so good. But it's pretty like a normal story compared to like Children of the Corn, which has a crazy ending. So like I feel
I
like
mean,
if
I'm
you
fine with either, whichever one you guys want to do.
well, I'll let you pick because I've seen
Or-
and I'm familiar with both.
Or we could just do 6 hours of The Stand.
Done.
I mean, we'll figure it out. We can just announce it later. We can
Yeah.
talk like off this.
It's a surprise again.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
definitely
Dun,
like.
dun.
Once I could figure out what my actual schedule for moving is, I want to do Veronica like first in April.
I gotta say, after some of the reviews I've seen, I'm not very much looking forward to this, but
Everything
I'm
I've
I'm
seen,
so excited.
everything I've seen says it's like it's bad, but it's like fun, very campy bad.
oh, okay.
It's
I haven't seen anything good about it, but
well, everybody I know that like. You
I just saw PhD Ape.
Oh. All right, yeah, secret for next week. All right, shout outs.
Well, I'm just gonna do what I did with um Silver Bullet, where I'm just gonna like recommend some of my favorite vampire movies.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
I basically like if you've listened to any episode of this know that I love vampires and they were like my favorite growing up. And so for me, like I know a lot of people grew up with like Bela Lugosi being their like sort of icon for Dracula, but the very, very first Dracula movie that I saw was Dracula Prince of Darkness, which starred Christopher Lee, which was from like the 60s or something. So I like just randomly bought that on VHS and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Probably shouldn't have been watching it whenever I did because I was kind of young. But so yeah, I definitely recommend checking out. Like he obviously there are so many iterations of Dracula to watch. But if you have only seen like also I do love Bela Lugosi, obviously. There's a portrait I did of him on my Instagram. But I do recommend checking out some of the Christopher Lee stuff if people haven't. But some of I don't know. I feel like for me, as far as kind of like iconic monster movies go, like there are so many good vampire movies versus like other creatures for me. I just like so many of them.
Yeah, but
Obviously everyone
there's
knows that
also like an insane amount of vampire movies. Like
Yeah.
so like a lot of them are very terrible. There just happens to be like a more plethora of good ones because the sheer amount of vampire movies there are.
Yeah, that's true. So like obviously everyone knows that The Lost Boys is like one of my all-time favorite movies. So if you haven't watched The Lost Boys, please go watch it. Um, Also the original version of Let the Right One In. I have not seen the remake, but the
It's-
original movie.
It's fine. It's not like as egregious as a lot of remakes are.
Okay, yeah, I need to watch it. But those are probably like my top two favorite ones. Also, obviously, we're gonna recommend Salem's Lot because it's Stephen King month. I actually like both the original and the remake for Fright Night. Um, I don't. I feel like those are two that are like, or Fright Night itself is like pretty popular, and I don't really know that I like it as much as some of the other ones, but it's definitely worth watching. Dracula, obviously from '92, is like a classic. with Keanu Reeves. And
Just
then
Keanu Reeves in his non-existent British accent.
that one is like good,
Oh yeah,
bad at
no, that
this
movie
point
is
because
fucking
there's a lot of
amazing.
people who put on accents that do not have accents that should not be doing accents. But it's like one of those movies that you watch, kind of like my husband and I were watching Hook last night, and
Oof.
it's like one of those movies that just has so many iconic people that it's like really kind of like a time capsule for when it came out because you know that none of these people would be in the same movie at this point. You know what I mean? So it's just like special. Obviously, I'm gonna recommend Interview with the Vampire because that's also one of my favorites. And then I'll just also say Prince of Darkness and Vampire's Kiss, and then I'll call it a day because there's just so many good ones. Um, I will say I've been hearing a lot of good things about Bliss, which is a Shudder exclusive, and I haven't seen it yet, but I have it on my list, so we'll see.
What about you, Kit?
I'm gonna recommend Blank Check, another film
Yes.
where Miguel Ferrer is a huge asshole
Hell yeah, I
and
love
does it
that movie.
perfectly.
Um, all right, I'm gonna say because I was gonna do. I pretty much had like the same idea Katie had of just like vampire movies I liked. Number one, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
I haven't seen that one yet either.
Absolutely perfect movie. Let the Right One In is maybe my favorite vampire movie of all time. The last whole like final scene in the pool is incredible. If you have not seen it,
Masterpiece.
Vampiros Lesbos is real good for like 70 campy nonsense with a fucking amazing soundtrack. 30 Days of Night also very good. And I feel like slightly underrated or underappreciated, I guess. Josh Hartnett looking real good in it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yep.
Remember, I was like looking at that like horror whatever, and I was like, why is Josh Hartnett in here? And then I was like, oh, okay, he deserves to be, I guess.
You should definitely watch it. It's like the comic is really good, but like it's just such a fucking genius premise of oh, well there's this like area that literally is nightfall for a month. Why would vampires not go there?
Crazy.
Fuck James Woods, but James Cam or John Carpenter's Vampires
I
is good.
literally, yeah, I left that off of my list, but I do that is still one of my like OG
I
favorites.
don't know if it's like original to that movie, but I fucking love the idea of the vampires like burying themselves in the ground,
Yeah.
just like during sunlight.
It seems cozy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just take a little dirt nap.
I
But you
also
get
Yeah.
to wake
just
up
the
from it.
fucking scene where like the vampire shows up at like the motel party and just splits that dude in half.
Oh.
Yes.
I also love when they're like shooting them and like pulling them out of the house and they just like it just is a good
Yeah.
movie, but unfortunately James Woods
Yeah,
is in it.
James Woods and Stephen Baldwin. I think
Oh my God, you're right.
I think it's Stephen Baldwin.
It's one of them.
All garbage people. I feel like Shadow of the Vampire doesn't get talked about a lot either. That movie is really
Yes, that
good.
movie rules.
I
Fucking
really like that one too.
Willem Dafoe played Nosferatu as like perfect casting. There's probably like Katie said earlier. There's probably like a shit ton more, but those are like some of my kind of all-time favorites. Highly recommend A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night if you have not seen it, which I think might still be on Shudder.
I'm not sure.
It's a movie I recommend to like anybody because it's not really a horror movie. It's it feels more like westerny, but like not action westerny. It's very strange, but it's really good. There's just something about the image of just like this kind of modern vampire rolling around town on a skateboard.
Literally.
Yeah.
Oh damn. See, that's the thing is that I I appreciate like when I mean this doesn't always work, but I appreciate when they come up with some different concept because like most of the movies that we listed has like pretty stereotypical kind of like vampire archetypes in it. Um, and I think that's part of why I liked The Night Flyer so much. Like, it's not the best movie I've ever seen, obviously, but like just the way that he looks and like how different he is, I think I like really appreciate that about it. And that's what I mean, we always talk about What We Do in the Shadows. That's obviously
Oh
another
yeah, that
great
was the one I
vampire
forgot.
movie.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about that one all the time. But again, it's like such a different take because because again, it's modern. Like, and it's like them dealing with modern stuff. It's obviously it's a comedy. A Girl Walks Home is not, but
I'll also say, like podcast wise, the Shudder uncut stuff. They did an episode where they've been releasing the extended interviews with people from horror noir. There's one with William Crane where they talk pretty in depth about what it took to get Blackula made. That is really fascinating.
wow.
I highly suggest listening to that whole like podcast series, but that episode specifically is very good.
Toit.
Yeah, there you go. You guys got a lot of homework.
Watch all 50 of these movies before next week.
Yeah, I mean, if you're stuck inside, fuck it, why not?
Yeah, let's just hope that things are better by the time this episode comes out. I'm putting that out into the
I
universe.
mean, that's Monday, so it won't be.
True.
All right, you can leave us ratings, reviews on iTunes, all that jazz. It's very helpful. Follow us on Twitter at I Hope You Suffer, and Instagram at I Hope You Suffer Podcast. Kit's other podcast, Riff Raff on Toilet of Hell. Maybe we'll have an episode by the time this comes out. Probably not.
I make no commitment.
That's why I said maybe. You guys should just release an episode that's just a clip show of only talking about like the Blu-ray corner stuff. Follow Katie on all of the stuff at Werewolf Face and buy art from her.
Yeah,
I'm
you can do that.
Kingston action figures.
Yes, give her those Kofi Kingston action figures at ko-fi.com/werewolfface.
Or something like that, yeah.
I assume Backstreet Boys probably got canceled.
Well, I don't think that's until the fall, so maybe not.
You can listen to my other podcast, Let Me Be Your Pot of Love. Yeah, we'll fucking figure out what we're doing next week and post it on Instagram and Twitter sometime after this episode drops to keep people updated, or the world will be over and we won't. But at least you got to hear us talk about Hot Rod before, so. All right, I hope you suffer, but why?
Where's my goddamn dead baby?
Vote President Batboy for 2020.
Yeah, PhD ape.
District Attorney Mermaid.
I'm buying a fucking Batboy shirt as soon as we're done.
Yes.
I just love his like long eyelashes and his little. He also has little tubes.
He's got fabulous lashes.
One of the
lashes for days.
One of the pictures on the website that was like one of the pictures of the 30 women he wants to date was a picture of some little kid cosplaying as Batboy next to like some fucking lady in a bikini. It was very weird.
Oh man.